My name is Allison, and at 30 years old, I thought I'd finally secured my future with an inheritance from my grandparents, a small house in downtown Raleigh, and an investment account I'd spent years managing carefully. It was my one piece of stability proof I could build something despite always being the overlooked daughter. So when my parents sat me down at dinner and casually announced they were handing it all to my sister without even asking me, it felt like a slap in the face. They assumed I'd just agree like always because I'm the responsible one who never complains. My sister, meanwhile, has always gotten everything money attention second chances while I scraped by. The shock on their faces when I calmly said I'd transferred control of the estate 6 weeks ago was something I'll never forget. They thought they could walk over me, dictate my life, and hand my hard-earned inheritance to someone who's never respected it. I was done playing the dutiful daughter, done letting them prioritize her needs over mine. This is the story of how I took back control and broke free from their endless favoritism, no matter how much they tried to guilt me into staying. If you're watching, drop a comment sharing where you're from, and if you've ever had to fight family expectations to protect what's yours. Hit subscribe and stay tuned for a story about standing your ground. Growing up in suburban Raleigh, North Carolina, I always felt like I was chasing a spotlight that never landed on me. Our family home, a tidy split level in a quiet neighborhood, had plenty of space. 3 bedrooms, a big backyard, but somehow all the attention seemed reserved for my sister Kristen. She was 2 years older, 32 now, and from the time I could remember, our parents treated her like she was the only one who mattered. It wasn't just that they gave her more, it was that they expected me to be fine with less, always. When I was 12, I spent months hinting about a birthday party at the local arcade. Nothing fancy, just a few friends, some pizza, and those claw machines I loved. My birthday came, and my mother was too busy driving Kristen, then 14, to her cheerleading tryouts. My father was caught up at his accounting firm, working late as usual. I ended up eating a cupcake alone in my room, flipping through a library book on computer coding to distract myself. Meanwhile, Kristen's 14th birthday was a spectacle. My parents rented out a community center, hired a caterer for a taco bar, and gave her a shiny new bicycle with streamers on the handlebars. I got a card with $20 inside and a pat on the head for being so mature. School was no different. I poured my heart into academics, earning straight A's and a spot on the math team. But my parents rarely showed up to my competitions, too busy cheering at Kristen's dance recitals or driving her to regional talent shows. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my mother spent the ceremony fussing over Kristen's prom dress drama in the audience, barely glancing at me as I gave my speech. For Kristen's graduation 2 years earlier, they'd thrown a backyard barbecue for 50 people, complete with a custom cake shaped like her favorite guitar. College was where the gap really widened. I got into NC State for computer science, a program I'd dreamed of since I taught myself basic coding on a secondhand laptop. But paying for it? That was on me. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at a bagel shop, evenings, tutoring high school kids in math to cover tuition, and a cramped apartment I shared with 3 roommates. My parents chipped in $200 a semester, which barely covered textbooks. Kristen, on the other hand, went to Duke, fully funded by mom and dad. She switched majors 3 times, art history, theater, then communications, took a gap year to explore herself in California, and still graduated debt-free because our parents paid for everything. When she failed a course, they hired a private tutor. When she wanted to live off campus, they covered her rent and utilities. I never forgot the sting of those years. While Kristen was posting photos from her coastal road trip, I was counting quarters to afford gas for my beat-up hatchback, a car I'd saved for by skipping meals. My parents called me their independent one as if it was a compliment, not a necessity. They'd beam with pride when I landed my first job as a software developer in downtown Raleigh, but their praise always felt hollow, like they were relieved I didn't need them, so they could focus on Kristen's endless crises. Kristen's life was a revolving door of chaos. She'd land a job event planner boutique sales, even a brief stint as a yoga instructor only to quit within months because it didn't suit her vibe. After each failure, our parents swooped in. They paid her rent when she blew her paycheck on concert tickets. They covered her car insurance when she claimed work stress made her forget the bills. Once they even funded a 6-week creative retreat in New Mexico when she said job hunting was too overwhelming. Meanwhile, I was budgeting every penny, working overtime to build a stable life, and teaching myself new coding languages to stay competitive. The pattern wasn't just financial. Kristen's emotional needs always took center stage. If she had a breakup, Mom would spend hours on the phone consoling her while I got a quick, "You okay?" if I dared mention my own struggles. Family dinners were a one-woman show starring Kristen, her latest drama, her newest passion project, her need for validation. I'd sit there nodding along, clearing dishes while Mom asked Kristen if she was eating enough. I learned early to keep my feelings locked away. If I spoke up about the unfairness, I was too sensitive or making it about me. So I built walls, kept my achievements and pain to myself, and focused on carving out my own path. When our grandparents passed away 2 years ago, they left me in charge of their estate, a modest house in downtown Raleigh, and an investment account worth about $60,000. It was their way of recognizing my responsibility, my drive. Managing that inheritance became my anchor, a tangible reward for years of self-reliance. I maintained the house, meticulously rented it out to cover taxes, and grew the account through careful investments. It was mine legally and morally. But deep down, I knew Kristen and our parents would see it as something else, an opportunity to fix her latest mess. After graduating, I dove headfirst into my career as a software developer for a tech startup in Raleigh. The pay started low, but I budgeted ruthlessly, tracking every expense in a spreadsheet I built myself to build a safety net. Living with roommates in a rundown apartment on the edge of town meant packing lunches and skipping social events, but it paid off. Within 4 years, I'd earned promotions, taken on freelance coding gigs for local businesses, and saved enough to move into a small rental in 5 Points. That space was basic, but it was mine, a symbol that I didn't need handouts to succeed. Managing my grandparents' inheritance gave me even more purpose. The house in downtown Raleigh was a cozy 2-bedroom bungalow they'd owned for decades, and the investment account held around $60,000 when I took over. I handled it all with precision, screening tenants to rent the house, paying property taxes on time, and reallocating the account's funds into low-risk stocks and bonds that grew steadily. Every decision felt like validation that my self-reliance wasn't just survival, but a strength. I rarely touched the money, treating it as a long-term buffer for emergencies or retirement. Kristen knew about the inheritance, of course, but I assumed she'd respect it as family property under my control. That assumption shattered about a year ago when Kristen's intrusion started. It began innocently enough. She called one evening saying she was in the area and needed to crash for a bit. I wasn't home, working late on a project deadline, but I'd given her a spare key for emergencies after our grandparents' passing. When I got back, I found her lounging on the couch in the rental house, takeout containers scattered, and my laptop open. She waved it off with a laugh. "I just borrowed it to check emails, mine's acting up." I let it slide, but noticed a few browser tabs open to shopping sites I didn't recognize. A few weeks later, she asked to use the house for a quick meeting with friends. I agreed reluctantly, figuring it was a one-time thing. But when I stopped by the next day, the place reeked of smoke, with empty bottles in the trash and a stain on the carpet from spilled wine. Kristen shrugged when I confronted her. It was just a small get-together. We cleaned up mostly. I demanded she return the key, but she changed the subject, talking about her latest job loss at a marketing firm where the boss didn't get her ideas. Our parents got involved as usual. Dad called to say family shares everything, and Mom sent a text guilting me about being supportive. The violations escalated. Kristen started showing up unannounced again, claiming she'd forgotten to give back the key. One time I came home from work to find her rifling through the desk drawers where I kept the inheritance documents, bank statements, deed copies, investment logs. She claimed she was just looking for a pen, but I spotted a folder slightly askew. When I checked the account online later, a small withdrawal of $500 had appeared transferred to her bank. She admitted it when I called her out. I needed it for a car repair, thought you wouldn't mind since it's family money. I changed the locks that weekend and updated the account passwords, but the damage was done. My sense of security started cracking. I tried setting boundaries directly. Over coffee at a neutral spot, I laid it out. Kristen, the inheritance is my responsibility. You can't access the house or account without asking, and honestly, not at all anymore. Her response was typical, defensive, and dismissive. Why are you so possessive? We're sisters. What's yours is ours. You've always been weird about sharing. When I held firm, she did what she always did, called our parents. That night, Mom lectured me about unity, and Dad emailed a long message about how Kristen admires my organization and just needs a little help. The final breach came after I returned from a 3-day conference in Charlotte where I'd presented a new app prototype to potential clients. My boss had praised my work, hinting at a raise if we secured the deal, and I was buzzing with accomplishment as I drove back to Raleigh. That faded the moment I unlocked the house door. The living room was trashed confetti on the floor, half-eaten platters of food attracting ants, and furniture rearranged haphazardly. In the kitchen, dishes piled in the sink, some with mold starting to form, and an unfamiliar coat draped over a chair. As I surveyed the mess, the intrusions multiplied. Damp towels cluttered the bathroom my toiletries used, and caps left off. The guest room bedding was rumpled with stains I didn't want to identify. Worst of all, in the office where I stored the inheritance files, papers were scattered across the desk. The deed to the house had fingerprints on it, and when I logged into the account, another withdrawal this time, $2,000 had been made to Kristen's linked card. Next to the computer sat a notepad with her handwriting listing party expenses like catering and DJ. I called Kristen immediately, my voice shaking. What did you do to the house? And the account, you took money again? She answered casually. Oh, that I threw a surprise engagement party for a friend. Their place was too small and yours was perfect. We only stayed 2 nights, needed a break from my apartment drama. 2 nights with who? My tone sharpened. Just friends, and we tidied up. The lie was obvious amid the chaos. You went through the documents. You used the account without permission. This is theft, Kristen. Her voice turned whiny, the victim card she always played. Why are you overreacting? I was in a tough spot. Roommates fighting, bills piling up. I figured you'd understand as my little sister. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a call from Mom. I ignored it, but Kristen added, Mom wants a family talk tomorrow. Says it's urgent. I hung up, staring at the disarray, feeling violated in a way that went beyond the physical mess. This wasn't just borrowing. It was erasing my boundaries, treating my inheritance like her personal fund. A friend from work who'd heard bits of my family stories validated my anger when I vented. Allison, that's not normal sibling stuff. She's crossing lines, and your parents enable it. The intrusions had started small, but built to this, invading my space, dipping into my funds, disregarding my authority over what was legally mine. With each incident, my trust eroded further, pushing me toward a decision I never thought I'd make. After the engagement party mess, I knew I couldn't let Kristen's intrusion slide anymore. My grandparents' inheritance, the house in downtown Raleigh, and the $60,000 investment account was my responsibility, not her personal playground. I'd spent years proving I could manage it, and her disregard felt like a betrayal of everything I'd built. I decided to confront her directly, hoping a clear boundary might stop the cycle. Over coffee at a cafe near my office, I laid it out plain and simple. Kristen, you're not allowed to use the house or touch the account anymore. It's not yours, and I don't want you coming over or withdrawing money without telling me first. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling into that familiar, defensive smile. "Why are you so worked up, Allison? It's family property. I just borrowed a little to help a friend. You've always been selfish about sharing." I kept my voice steady, though my hands gripped the coffee mug tighter. "It's not sharing when you don't ask. You threw a party, trashed the place, and took $2,000 without my permission. That stops now." Kristen rolled her eyes, leaning back in her chair. "You're blowing this out of proportion. I'll pay it back when I get my next job." I'd heard that promise before, empty words she never followed through on. When I pressed her to return the spare key, she deflected, saying she'd look for it later, and quickly changed the subject to her latest breakup drama. I left the cafe feeling drained, knowing she hadn't taken me seriously. By evening, my phone lit up with a call from Mom. "Allison, why are you being so hard on your older sister? She's going through a tough time." I hung up, unsurprised that Kristen had run to our parents just like always. The real confrontation came a week later at a family dinner my parents insisted on hosting. Mom texted me about an urgent meeting, and though every instinct screamed to skip it, I knew avoiding them wouldn't solve anything. I drove to their house in the suburbs, my stomach knotting with dread. The table was set with Mom's usual pot roast and mashed potatoes, Kristen's favorite, not mine, despite my vegetarian diet for the past 2 years. Dad sat at the head, his jaw tight, a sign he was gearing up for a serious talk. Mom fussed with the serving dishes, avoiding eye contact, while Kristen scrolled on her phone, acting unbothered. The silence was heavy, broken only by the clink of silverware. After 10 minutes of strained small talk about the neighbors and Dad's golf game, he put down his fork with a deliberate thud. "Your older sister is in trouble." Dad began, glancing at Kristen, who was still staring at her plate. "She lost her job at that boutique, unfairly I might add, and her landlord's hiking the rent." Mom jumped in, her voice overly bright. "It's outrageous, really. They gave her no notice." Kristen mumbled, "They sent a letter last month, barely audible, but nobody acknowledged it." I stayed quiet, already sensing the direction of this setup. Dad cleared his throat again. "The point is, Kristen needs some help, and family steps up for family." Mom nodded, reaching for Kristen's hand. "We've always taught you girls to support each other." I took a slow breath, bracing myself. "What exactly are you asking?" I knew the answer, but I needed them to say it out loud. Mom's tone turned syrupy, the one she used when trying to soften a demand. "We think it'd be best if you let Kristen take over the inheritance for a while. The house the accountant'd give her a fresh start until she's back on her feet. Just temporary, of course." I stared at them, my fork frozen midair. "Dad want me to hand over my grandparents' estate to Kristen, without discussing it with me first." Dad leaned forward, his voice firm. "It's family property, Allison. You've done a great job managing it, but older sister needs it more right now." Kristen finally looked up, a faint smile tugging at her lips, as if she'd already won. "I'll take good care of it, Allison. I promise." The room felt smaller, the air thicker. "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Absolutely not." Mom's smile faltered. "Allison Carter, don't be selfish," she snapped, using my full name like a weapon, the way she always did when I stepped out of line. "Kristen's in a tough spot. You've always been so capable, so independent." Dad chimed in, his tone hardening. "This is what families do. We help each other. You have a good job, a stable life. Kristen doesn't." "That's the problem," I shot back, my words spilling out before I could stop them. "You've always given Kristen everything, money, time, excuses, while I had to figure it out alone. I worked 2 jobs to pay for college. I saved every penny to survive. I've managed that inheritance with care because it was entrusted to me, not her. And now you want me to hand it over because she can't manage her life." Kristen's face flushed, but she didn't speak. Mom's eyes welled up. "You're making this so hard, Allie." Driving back to my 5 Points rental that night, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, I felt a storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a strange clarity. The dinner had laid bare what I'd always known: my family would never see my needs as equal to Kristen's. They'd always expect me to sacrifice, to step aside, to fix her messes while ignoring my own boundaries. I couldn't keep living like that. Not when the inheritance, my grandparents' legacy, was at stake. By the time I parked, one decision crystallized: I had to protect what was mine, even if it meant cutting them out. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. Instead of coding, I spent hours on the phone with a lawyer I'd found online discussing how to secure the inheritance. The house in downtown Raleigh and the $60,000 investment account were legally mine, but Kristen's unauthorized withdrawals showed I couldn't trust her or my parents' judgment. The lawyer suggested transferring control to a trust, naming me as sole trustee to block any access. I set up an appointment for the next day, my resolve growing with each step. By afternoon, I was searching for a new place to live, somewhere my family wouldn't know. I scoured listings in Raleigh, far from downtown and 5 Points. After a few calls, I found a one-bedroom apartment in Oakwood, a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood with historic charm. It was smaller than my current place, with creaky floors and a tiny kitchen, but it felt safe, separate. I met the landlord, a retired professor named Dorothy, who liked my steady job and quiet demeanor. "When can you move in?" she asked, pen poised over the lease. "This weekend," I replied, signing on the spot using savings I'd set aside for emergencies. The logistics came together fast. I opened a new bank account at a credit union across town, transferring half the investment account's funds, $30,000, to ensure Kristen couldn't touch it. I set up mail forwarding to a P.O. box, avoiding any trace to Oakwood. Instead of moving everything, I left most of my furniture behind. The couch, the kitchen table, they felt tainted by Kristen's disregard. I took only essentials: my laptop, a few coding books, clothes, and a framed photo of my grandparents, the one thing that still felt pure. Each trip to Oakwood was deliberate, dropping off boxes after work to avoid suspicion. Setting up the new apartment was like reclaiming myself. I bought a simple desk for my coding projects, fitting it into a corner by a window that caught soft morning light. A new mattress and bedding, crisp white sheets, and a blue quilt made the bedroom a sanctuary. I hung a single plant, a gift from a coworker, in the living room. Every choice was mine, free from family expectations. For the first time, I felt my shoulders relax, the constant tension of anticipating Kristen's next move fading. To fill the quiet, I started exploring Oakwood. I joined a local coding meetup where programmers swapped ideas over coffee. I signed up for a weekend pottery class at a community center, something I'd never had time for before. At a neighborhood book club, I met Emma, a graphic designer with a warm laugh who lived down the hall. These small connections, people who knew me as Allison, not Kristen's sister, felt like a lifeline. I told only one person my new address: my friend Stephanie, who I'd known since college. She'd always seen through my family's dynamics, offering a listening ear without judgment. During those weeks, I kept my family at a distance. Their texts piled up: moms just checking in messages, dad's curt demands to call back, Kristen's mix of apologies and accusations. I replied sparingly, with vague excuses about work deadlines or being under the weather. When mom pressed for a Sunday dinner, I claimed a project crunch. When Kristen texted asking to meet, I said I was out of town. They didn't notice the shift, too used to my independence as a given. That blindness gave me space to execute my plan. The lawyer's office became my anchor. Over 2 meetings, we finalized the trust, locking the house and remaining funds under my sole control. I listed the downtown house for sale, a decision that felt both painful and freeing. It wasn't just about cutting Kristen off. It was about severing the tie that let my family treat my boundaries as optional. The paperwork was meticulous, every signature a step toward reclaiming my peace. By the 6th week, the trust was active, the sale was in motion, and my new life in Oakwood was taking shape. Stephanie visited one evening, bringing takeout tacos and a bottle of wine. As we sat on my floor, new furniture still on order, she looked around and smiled. "This feels like you, Allison." Not their version of you. I nodded, a lump in my throat. I didn't realize how much I needed this, a space they can't touch. She raised her glass. To starting over. I clinked mine against hers, feeling lighter than I had in years. That lightness wasn't just from the move. It was the freedom of knowing my family couldn't invade my life anymore. The inheritance, once a source of pride, had become a battleground. By transferring control, I'd drawn a line, one they'd soon discover was permanent. But I knew the real test was coming. My parents' messages were growing frantic, Kristen's tone more desperate. They were planning another dinner, another attempt to pull me back into their script. I wasn't sure when it would happen, but I was ready to face it on my terms. My new life in Oakwood was taking root, but my family's relentless messages kept pulling at the edges. Mom's texts oscillated between concern and guilt trips. Dad's voicemails grew sharper, and Kristen swung from pleading to outright blame. I deflected them all with curt replies, guarding my peace while I finalized the trust and house sale. Then came the inevitable, a text from Mom on a Tuesday evening: family dinner tomorrow, 6:00 p.m. We need to talk. No dodging this. My stomach tightened, but I knew this was the moment to end their hold over me once and for all. I spent the day preparing. Over lunch, I ran through possible arguments with Stephanie, her calm advice grounding me. You've set your boundaries, stick to them. A long walk through Oakwood's quiet streets cleared my mind, and I chose a simple sweater and slacks, an outfit that made me feel steady. Driving to my parents' suburban Raleigh home, I braced for the confrontation. The house hadn't changed. Mom's roses still lined the porch, Dad's car parked neatly in the driveway, but I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, a silent declaration of separation. Mom greeted me, her eyes wary. You don't need to ring the bell, Allison. This is home. I stepped inside without responding, the familiar hum of the TV in the background. Dad was in his usual armchair flipping through a golf magazine, while Kristen sat cross-legged on the couch texting furiously. Mom ushered us to the dining room where her pot roast sat steaming, flanked by mashed potatoes nobody would eat. The air was heavy as we took our seats. The meal started quietly, tension simmering beneath forced small talk about neighbors and weather. Then Mom set her glass down, her voice careful but pointed. Your mom and dad are worried about your older sister. She's been struggling lately, tight on money and unemployed too. Dad nodded, folding his arms. We've been talking, and we think the inheritance could help her get back on track. The house, the account, it's more than one person needs. I leaned back, pulse quickening but voice calm. You mean you want me to give Kristen control of what's legally mine? Mom flinched, her smile faltering. Not give, just share for a while. You're so good with money, Allison. She could use the house to stabilize, maybe some funds for expenses. Dad added, we checked with a lawyer friend. It's straightforward to transfer partial rights if you agree. The betrayal stung. They'd gone behind my back again. I took a slow breath. That's funny because I transferred control of the inheritance 6 weeks ago. Silence gripped the room. Mom's hand froze mid-gesture, a fork slipping from her fingers. Dad's eyes narrowed, confusion hardening into frustration. Kristen's phone dropped to her lap, her mouth open. Transferred. What does that mean? Mom asked, voice shaking. I put the account into a trust with me as sole trustee, I said. The house is under contract to sell. I did it after Kristen used the house for her party, withdrew money without permission, and rifled through the legal documents. That wasn't sharing, it was taking. Kristen's face reddened. It was just a one-time thing. I needed help, and you're acting like I stole something. The house is family property. It's my responsibility, I shot back. Grandma and Grandpa chose me to manage it, not you. You've never respected that, or me. Mom waved her hands, voice rising. Enough with this boundary talk, Allison. Families don't need rules like that. We help each other. I shook my head. Not when it's one-sided. You've never helped me, not when I worked 2 jobs for college, not when I built my life from nothing. Dad's voice boomed. You're being selfish, hiding things from us. What kind of daughter does that? I met his stare. The kind who's tired of being invisible unless you need something. The kind who sees you'll always choose Kristen over me. Mom's eyes welled up. We love you both equally. You're making this up in your head. I let out a sharp laugh. Equally, you paid for Kristen's entire degree, her trips, her rent. I got $200 a semester and a pat on the back. When I managed the inheritance, you didn't care until it could solve her problems. Kristen's voice broke, tears streaming. I'm struggling, Allison. You're leaving me with nothing. I looked at her, unmoved by the familiar act. You've had years to figure it out. I'm not your safety net anymore. Mom reached for my hand, pleading. Allison Carter, you can't do this to us. The full name hit hard, but I pulled away. I'm doing this for me. You've never respected my choices or my rights to the inheritance. That stops now. Dad stood, his face flushed. You're tearing this family apart. You can't just walk away. I rose, grabbing my coat. I already have. The inheritance is locked away, and I'm done being your backup plan. If you want to talk, really talk, not guilt me, you know how to reach me. But I'm not playing this role anymore. Kristen sobbed louder. You're heartless. I just needed a little help. I didn't turn back. Then help yourself, Kristen. Like I always did. As I stepped outside, Mom's voice followed, desperate. We're still family, Allison. I kept walking, the night air cool against my skin. The drive back to Oakwood felt like a release. I'd laid bare the truth, severed the ties that bound me to their expectations, and walked away on my own terms. They'd never change, but I had, and I was finally free. The night I walked away from that dinner, something shifted inside me. The weight of my family's expectations, their demands, their refusal to see me as more than a fixer, it all fell away. Back in my Oakwood apartment, I sat on my new couch, staring at the framed photo of my grandparents. Their trust in me, their legacy was safe, now locked in a trust and freed from my family's grasp. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened, like I could breathe without bracing for the next crisis. But that freedom came with a cost, one I hadn't fully anticipated. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Relief hit first, a lightness that made my steps feel easier as I walked to the local coffee shop or coded late into the night. Then came doubt. Had I been too harsh? Too final? Guilt crept in, years of being told family comes first, whispering that I'd broken some sacred rule. Beneath it all was grief, not for the family I'd lost, but for the one I'd never had, the one where my needs mattered as much as Kristen's. Those feelings swirled, but they didn't pull me back. I'd made my choice, and I was sticking to it. My new life in Oakwood became my refuge. I dove deeper into the community, finding joy in small rituals. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, picking out fresh herbs for recipes I'd never tried before. Evenings at the coding meetup, where I collaborated on open-source projects with people who valued my ideas. My pottery class turned into a weekly highlight, shaping clay into bowls, and mugs gave me a sense of creation I'd buried under family obligations. Emma, my neighbor, invited me to a local art walk, where we wandered through galleries and laughed over shared stories. These connections, small but genuine, reminded me I could build a life without the shadow of my family's favoritism. My phone became a battleground. Dad's messages were sharp, accusing me of betraying the family. Your mother's heartbroken. Kristen's crashing with a friend. This isn't you. Mom's texts swung from guilt trips I can't sleep worrying about you to attempts at normalcy, like sharing a recipe I'd never asked for. Kristen's were the most unpredictable, from angry outbursts. You've always hated me, to pleas for my address, promising she'd keep it secret. I didn't respond, letting their words sit unanswered. Stephanie's advice echoed in my mind. You don't owe them access to your peace. I held firm, redirecting my energy to my work, my friends, my new routines. At the office, I threw myself into my projects, earning a promotion that recognized my leadership, not just my reliability. I started a blog on coding, sharing tips I'd learned over years of self-teaching. On weekends, I hiked trails outside Raleigh, the quiet of the woods, grounding me in a way family dinners never had. Each step forward felt like rewriting my story, one where I wasn't defined by Kristen's chaos or my parents' blind spots. The hardest moments came on Sunday evenings when I'd once driven to my parents' house for dinner. The silence of those hours stung, but I filled them with new habits, cooking elaborate stir-fries, reading novels from the book club, or calling Stephanie to debrief the week. Slowly, the emptiness became opportunity, a space to discover who I was without the role they'd forced on me. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, building a life that felt fully mine. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned is that family doesn't mean obligation at the expense of your well-being. For years, I believed love meant giving until I had nothing left: my time, my resources, my peace. But real love, even for family, requires respect, and respect starts with boundaries. My family saw my strength as an excuse to demand more, never questioning the cost to me. Cutting them off wasn't selfish. It was survival. It was choosing a life where I could flourish, not just function. To anyone watching, I hope my story resonates. If you've ever felt trapped by family expectations, forced to carry burdens that aren't yours, know this: you have the right to say no. You can walk away from relationships that diminish you, even if they're blood. It's not easy, grief and doubt will hit hard, but your peace is worth protecting. Don't let anyone tell you it's wrong to put yourself first when those around you refuse to see your worth. Thank you for listening to my journey. It's been raw, messy, and liberating. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family or cut ties to find your freedom, share your story in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else take that first step. Please like this video, hit that subscribe button, and join me for more stories about breaking free and building the life you deserve.